You're listening to Overhead Story Channel. Enjoy.
Christmas at her parents' house was always a little much. Her mom went overboard with everything: 8-foot tree, gingerbread-scented candles in every room, matching pajamas for the entire family, including me, though I'd stopped wearing mine after year 3. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate the effort. It was just fake. Loud, chaotic, and oddly sterile, like we were all acting out some version of a Hallmark movie none of us actually believed in. This year was different though. Colder. And not because of the snow piling outside the windows. No, this was something else, something beneath the surface. The air in that house had teeth. I remember standing next to the fireplace, holding a mug of cider that had gone cold, trying to spot anything familiar in the room. I'd known these people for over a decade, her parents, her siblings, even the cousins that showed up late every year with store-bought pies and big personalities. But that night, the way they looked at me felt wrong. Like I was some outsider they'd tolerated for too long. Like the invitation this year had been more of a formality than a welcome. She was in the center of it all, of course. Her name was Lauren. Beautiful. Charming. The kind of woman who could walk into a room and light it up just by adjusting her scarf. And even after everything, after all of it, I'll still admit she was magnetic. But that night, her spark was aimed elsewhere. There was a guy sitting in the corner near the tree. I didn't recognize him, which was strange because her family didn't do strays at holiday gatherings. Everyone there was blood or married to blood or had grown up on the same street in their tiny Minnesota suburb. But this guy, dark blazer, smug little half-smile, he didn't belong. Except, he acted like he did. Lauren kept glancing at him. Not long stares or anything too obvious. Just little flickers. Microseconds. But I noticed. Her eyes would catch his and he'd nod barely. A silent language. One I didn't understand at the time, but now I could recite it like scripture. She called my name just after the stockings had been emptied and her dad finished one of his drawn-out toasts about family being everything. Her voice was light, practiced, like she was about to hand me a joke gift, maybe another bottle of hot sauce for the collection she never liked me starting. "Mark," she said, stepping toward me, envelope in hand, her smile as wide as a knife. "This one's for you." I gave her a puzzled look, took the envelope without thinking, and felt the weight of it, too light for a card, but stiff enough to matter. I opened it slowly. Inside were divorce papers. Not a letter. Not a "we need to talk" note. Not even a scribbled apology. Just papers. Neatly signed by her. Filed. Official. Final. For a second, I didn't breathe. My eyes moved across the lines like they belonged to someone else. I actually blinked, thinking maybe I'd misread it. "Are you serious?" I asked. My voice didn't even sound like mine. That's when it happened. The moment burned into my memory like an old scar you forget until it itches in the cold. That guy, the one in the corner, lifted his glass. A quiet toast. Nothing flashy. But it was for her. And she smiled back at him. Then her mom clapped. Just once at first, as if unsure. Then her sister joined in, followed by a cousin, then another. A weird wave of applause moved through the room like a ripple through a pond after a stone's been thrown. I turned in place, stunned, looking around like maybe someone would stop this, say something, defend me. No one did. "What the hell is this?" I asked, louder this time. She shrugged. Shrugged. Like she was canceling dinner plans, not a marriage. "It's time," she said. "We've been going through the motions for too long. You know it." I felt the room tilt. Her father was pouring champagne into flutes. Her mom was crying, but the happy kind, like something good had finally been allowed to happen. And him. I gestured toward the man who still hadn't moved from his smug position by the tree. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. "Unbelievable," I muttered. "You're doing this now?" "On Christmas." It made sense, she said, as if we were discussing hosting logistics. "With everyone here." Her tone was chilling. Clinical. No warmth. No remorse. "I gave you everything," I said quietly. Not to guilt her. Not to win her back. Just to hear the words out loud. "I built my life around us." She met my eyes then, for the first time since I opened the envelope. "And I didn't ask you to," she replied. The breath left me like I'd been hit. People were laughing again. I heard someone joke about fresh starts and making room for better things. I don't even remember who it was. I was too busy trying to remember how to stay standing. The mug slipped from my hand and hit the carpet with a thud. No one flinched. I stood there, in that room full of people who had once hugged me at weddings, handed me beers on summer weekends, congratulated me when we got the house. And now they were celebrating my exile like it was the season's main event. I turned to leave, still holding the envelope like it might self-destruct. "Mark," she called after me. I didn't stop walking. But I heard what she said next. I hope you can find peace. Peace. She said it like she was blessing me. Like she was doing me a favor. I didn't say a word as I stepped out into the snow. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the keys trying to unlock my car. The engine turned over, but I didn't drive. I just sat there watching the house through the windshield. Inside, they were clinking glasses. Outside, I sat alone in the cold. That was the last Christmas I spent with her family. Hell, that was the last time I saw most of them. But in a strange way, it was the clearest I'd ever seen any of them. The masks were off. And what I saw underneath was worse than I ever imagined. The snow hadn't melted by the time I got back home, but something in me already had. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark living room staring at the divorce papers spread across the coffee table, the string lights from the tree reflecting off the slick, legal-grade paper like confetti on a crime scene. I kept thinking back to her face, so composed, so indifferent. As if we were no longer real to her. Just paperwork. But the truth is, this didn't start under that damn tree. It started months ago. And maybe part of me knew it all along. The first cracks were small, barely visible. Passwords changed on our shared accounts. She called it security hygiene. At the time, it didn't even register. I laughed and said something about her being too into tech blogs. She smiled and said, better safe than sorry. Safe from what? A few weeks later, she started coming home later than usual. Night classes, she said. I'm finally gonna take that web design course I've always talked about. I wanted to be supportive. I really did. I even offered to help her practice. But she waved me off. It's more self-guided, she said. You wouldn't enjoy it. A lot of coding stuff. She was right, I wouldn't have. But I still should have seen it for what it was, a buffer. Distance disguised as ambition. The gym came next. Lauren had never been big on working out aside from the occasional yoga class with friends. But suddenly she was going every other night. High-intensity interval training. Boxing. Kickboxing. New leggings, new shoes, new routines she never wanted to talk about. I just need to feel strong, she said one night when I asked why the change. I told her she already was. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I remember one night, maybe early November, she came home from the gym later than usual. Her hair was still damp, her cheeks flushed. She said her class had run long, that traffic was bad. I asked her if she wanted dinner and she said no, she'd grabbed something on the way. But later, when I took out the trash, I noticed the fast food wrappers in the bin, 2 sets of fries. 2 drinks. She didn't like fries. Never did. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe she was just hungry. But the excuses started piling up like junk mail. Things I used to overlook suddenly didn't sit right. One Saturday, I found a receipt on the kitchen counter. It was from a place across town, a little wine bar we'd gone to on our 2nd anniversary. She hadn't mentioned going there. In fact, she said she was working late that night. When I asked her about it, she barely looked up from her phone. Oh, that? Yeah, we went out after class. Just a couple of girls. That was the first time I caught her checking her reflection in the mirror while talking to me. Her phone was a fortress. She used to leave it lying around, face up, never thinking twice. But now? Always face down. Always locked. Notifications silenced. I asked her once if something was wrong with it, maybe she was expecting spam or something, and she just laughed and said, "You're being paranoid." Paranoid. It stuck with me. Not because of what she said, but because of how calm she was saying it. Like she'd already practiced the line. I started noticing her smile was different too. Slower. Calculated. Like she was waiting to see if I'd believe it. And I always did. Until I didn't. There was a text late one night, around 1 a.m. Her phone lit up on the nightstand. She was already asleep. I glanced at it out of instinct. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. The preview said, "Had a great time tonight. Can't stop thinking about what you said." I miss, and then the screen faded. I felt my stomach drop. I picked up the phone, half shaking. It was locked. New passcode. Of course. I sat there in the dark staring at that black screen, feeling like a stranger in my own bed. I didn't wake her. I didn't say a word. The next morning, I asked casually if she'd gotten any weird messages lately. She blinked, paused just a second too long, then said, "Nope. Just spam." She kissed me on the cheek and poured her coffee like nothing happened. But something had, and I couldn't unsee it. After that, I started paying closer attention. There was the weekend she said she was going to visit her friend Brittany. I offered to drop her off. She said no, she'd drive. Might stay the night if we drink, she said. I checked Brittany's Instagram later that night. She was in Chicago, 2 states away, posting photos from a cousin's wedding. I stared at the screen for 5 straight minutes, the glow of it burning into my hands. I never confronted Lauren about it. I just filed it away. One more pin in the map of my suspicion. I started noticing a pattern to her absences. Certain days of the week. Certain excuses recycled with minor tweaks. A few times I thought about following her. Once I even got in the car and drove to the studio she said she was taking classes at. I parked across the street. Waited. Watched. She never showed. I sat there for an hour until the instructor, middle-aged guy in a Patagonia vest, locked up and left. I remember staring at the closed sign, feeling the cold seep into my bones. Then I went home and made dinner like nothing had happened. Eventually, I stopped asking questions. Not because I didn't care, but because the answers were already speaking without being said. Sometimes she'd come home humming. Not singing, not cheerful, just this quiet, tuneless hum, like her body hadn't realized it was still pretending. I used to love that sound. Now it filled me with dread. I found another receipt tucked in her coat pocket. Dry cleaning for a shirt I didn't recognize. Men's size large. I asked her about it and she laughed loud and high-pitched. Oh, that? It's for a guy at work. He spilled wine on it during a team dinner. She had an explanation for everything. Every receipt, every timestamp, every new behavior. But it all felt too ready, too rehearsed. And no matter how clean her answers were, the gap between us kept growing. Not gradually, like it had intention behind it. Like she was building an exit ramp she thought I wouldn't notice. It wasn't just that she was pulling away. It was that she was doing it with a plan. And that terrified me more than anything else. It was a Wednesday when the truth finally cornered me. Not some dramatic discovery, not a shouting match or a breakdown. No. It happened in the quietest way possible, almost like the truth didn't need to scream because it knew it had me. I had a meeting that afternoon that got canceled last minute. I thought about heading back to the office to get ahead on some reports, but instead I found myself steering the car home without really deciding to. I told myself it was nothing, just a chance to catch up on laundry, maybe prep dinner for once. But underneath, something else was pulling at me. As I turned onto our street, I saw it. Parked just down from our driveway, angled like it didn't want to be noticed but hadn't tried very hard. A silver Mazda CX-5. I'd seen it before. Not just once or twice. I'd noticed it outside the gym Lauren supposedly went to. The same gym I later found out didn't offer any of the classes she claimed to be taking. I'd seen it near her office parking lot, too, once during a late lunch break when I brought her a sandwich. She wasn't there that day. Said she had an off-site meeting. The license plate was familiar. 3 numbers, then the letters GUIS. It was here. At our house. My pulse thudded in my ears as I parked across the street instead of pulling into the driveway. I stayed in the car, heart hammering. The curtains in the upstairs bedroom were drawn shut. The same ones Lauren liked to keep open to let the light in. But today? Closed. Like the room didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to go inside. Honestly, I didn't want to know. But denial wasn't an option anymore. I couldn't keep inventing justifications to sleep next to someone who smiled while lying to my face. So I got out. The front door was unlocked. That should have been my first sign. Everything was quiet. Not just calm quiet in that deadened way houses get when they're holding their breath. No TV. No music. Just the faint hum of the heater kicking on. I took slow steps toward the staircase, trying to control my breathing. Every part of me was screaming to walk back out. To turn around and pretend I'd never come home early. But I kept climbing. At the top of the stairs, I could hear something. A laugh. Soft. Feminine. Hers. But it wasn't the kind of laugh I knew. It wasn't the tired chuckle she gave me when I made dumb puns or teased her about watching reality TV. It was lighter. Less guarded. Than a man's voice. Low. Confident. The bedroom door was cracked open just enough for me to see. I'll never forget what I saw. She was sitting on the edge of our bed, barefoot, wearing a t-shirt that wasn't hers and definitely wasn't mine. Her hair was damp, tucked behind one ear like it used to be when we first started dating. He was behind her, pulling on a hoodie. The same man from Christmas. The one who raised his glass to her betrayal like it was a private joke. They hadn't heard me yet. I should have felt rage. Fire. Betrayal hot enough to burn the house down. But instead everything went numb. Like my body had shut off the valve to protect me from breaking in half. I backed away slowly, each step down the stairs deliberate. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I didn't even cry. I just walked out, got in my car, and drove. It felt like my life had cracked in half, quietly, efficiently, like something pre-cut in a factory line. No need for dramatics when the damage was already done. I checked into a motel off the highway that smelled like lemon disinfectant and old cigarettes. The woman at the front desk didn't ask why I looked like I hadn't slept in a week. She just handed me the key with a nod and a soft, "Here you go, hon." I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall for hours. That night, I didn't text Lauren. I didn't call. I didn't ask for an explanation because I already had it. There wasn't a single word she could say that would undo what I'd seen. No twist, no gaslighting, no therapy session could repaint the picture that had just been seared into my mind. It was done. I thought about my parents, how they always said love takes work, that you have to fight for it, even when it's hard. But what they never told me was what to do when the other person stops fighting. When they start building a new life while pretending to hold up the old one. What do you do when you realize you've been the only one trying? By morning, I decided. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want confrontation. I just wanted out. Not in a petty way. Not even in anger. Just in truth. I drove to the first lawyer's office I could find on Google with decent reviews. The woman behind the desk was kind, efficient, and didn't flinch when I said the word infidelity. She handed me a clipboard and started explaining the steps as if this were just another Tuesday. I nodded along, numb. While waiting for my documents to print, I texted Lauren one line, "I won't be home tonight. I'll be in touch about next steps." She replied an hour later with, "Mark? What's going on?" I didn't answer. Let her wonder. Back at the motel, I sat with a legal pad in my lap, trying to list out everything we shared: bank accounts, car insurance, the house, the dog we were going to adopt and never did. The memories kept interrupting. Little things. The way she used to say my name when she wanted something. The notes she'd leave in my lunch bag when things were good. The way she used to sit on the kitchen counter and read recipes while I cooked. And now? She was sitting on that same bed with someone else. Wearing his shirt. Laughing like nothing mattered. That night, I stood outside the motel in the cold, hands stuffed in my coat pockets, looking up at the stars. I thought I'd feel hollow. I thought I'd break. But instead, I just felt clear. Like someone had finally turned the lights on in a room I didn't know I was trapped in. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't ask why. Because I already knew. She'd made her choice. And I was finally ready to make mine. I didn't go back to the house. Not for my toothbrush. Not for clothes. Not even to check if she noticed I was gone. Everything I needed fit in a small overnight bag I grabbed from the trunk, and that's all I took. The motel became home, if you could call it that. The Wi-Fi barely worked and the water pressure was tragic, but it was mine, free of her voice, her scent, her lies. In the days that followed, everything moved in slow motion. My lawyer sent over a checklist: asset disclosures, joint accounts, shared property, proof of income. It was clinical, dry, the language of untangling a life. But buried in that paper shuffle were years of love, fights, vacations, broken promises, all reduced to bullet points. The first time I said "my wife is cheating on me" out loud was in that lawyer's office. I half whispered it like it was still a secret. She nodded, didn't flinch, just clicked her pen and asked, "Do you want to pursue fault-based grounds, or are you seeking a no-fault filing?" It hit me then how ordinary my situation had become. To them, this wasn't betrayal. It was paperwork. I chose no fault. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want to give her more power than she already had. The courtroom wasn't where I needed justice. It was in the silence. The cold clarity of absence. That was enough. Or so I thought. A few days into the process, while reviewing documents with my lawyer, something weird came up: an inconsistency in our insurance filings. We were verifying dependents, joint liabilities, that kind of thing. And when we pulled up Lauren's previous records, medical history, beneficiary details, my lawyer furrowed his brow and asked, "Mark, do you have a daughter?" I blinked. "What?" "There's a dependent listed here, 8 years old. Not your biological child, but claimed under your wife's coverage. You didn't mention her in the affidavit." I froze. There was no daughter. We never had kids. Lauren had always said she wasn't ready, that she wanted to wait until things were more stable. And I'd agreed. We weren't in a rush. But this wasn't just some paperwork error. There was a name. A birth date. A full listing. It was real. And I had no idea what any of it meant. My hands started shaking. "I need that file," I said, my voice flat. He printed the page. It was stamped, official. No typos. The child's name was Grace Evelyn Foster. Foster. Lauren's maiden name. I stared at it for a long time. Then I remembered something. Years ago, when we were still dating, she mentioned raising her cousin's kid for a while. The story was vague. I thought it was temporary, maybe a babysitting arrangement. It never came up again. But the age matched. 8 years old now. That would have put her at around 2 or 3 when Lauren and I got married. I left the office early that day. Said I needed air. But really, I drove to the county clerk's building. I asked for access to public adoption records, told them I was trying to verify familial guardianship. It took some digging, but eventually I found it. Grace Evelyn Foster. Adopted at age 2. Adopted by Lauren. Not by us. By her. Alone. I scanned the record again. My name wasn't listed anywhere. Not as an adoptive parent. Not even as an emergency contact. But something else caught my eye under biological parents. The mother's name was listed as Madison Ray Cole. That name meant nothing to me. I sat there in the lobby for nearly an hour with that sheet in my hand, trying to make sense of it. This wasn't just a lie about cheating. This was a lie about a whole life I'd never been part of. A child I didn't know existed. A legal process carried out without my involvement. And yet somehow, Lauren had listed Grace on our joint insurance, our taxes, even introduced her to people casually at parties as a family friend's kid she helped raise for a while. And I had nodded along. Like a fool. I didn't even know what to feel, a rage, confusion, betrayal, it all bled together. But something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was about fabrication. A constructed reality. A woman so carefully composed she'd rewritten entire pieces of her past and handed them to me like they were true. I needed answers. Not from Lauren. She just twisted into another well-practiced story. No, I wanted the truth from someone who didn't owe me anything. I started searching for Madison. The name wasn't common, but it wasn't unique either. I sifted through social media accounts, university directories, public listings. It took 2 days, but I found her, Madison Ray Cole, 36, working at a college library in a quiet town in Ohio. Her profile picture was old, blurry, but something in her eyes looked real. I sent a letter. Not an email. Not a call. A handwritten letter. I told her who I was. That I wasn't seeking anything from her, no confrontation, no drama. Just clarity. I explained what I'd found in the adoption records and that I'd recently learned the truth about Lauren. I said if she was open to it, I'd like to talk. I mailed it with no return address. Just a P.O. box I rented for this exact reason. I didn't expect a reply. But she wrote back. A week later, I got a note in careful handwriting. Short. Direct. I never thought I'd hear from anyone tied to Lauren again. I'm open to meeting. I have questions too. She signed it simply Madison. We agreed to meet halfway at a roadside diner just outside Akron. I drove 5 hours, hands clenched around the wheel the entire time. I didn't know what I was walking into. For all I knew, Madison would slam a coffee down and tell me to go to hell. But she didn't. She was calm. Distant at first. Polite but guarded. I handed her the documents, insurance records, adoption filings, copies of the divorce forms I'd beg *N processing. I told her what I knew and, more importantly, what I didn't. She read in silence. When she looked up, there was something in her expression I didn't expect: relief. She never told you, Madison said softly. Not even once? Not a word, I replied. Madison shook her head. That sounds like her. I didn't press. I let her speak when she was ready. Eventually, she told me her story. That she and Lauren had met in college. That they were close once, too close. But something happened. A falling out. A betrayal. And when Madison got pregnant, Lauren offered to help, offered to take the child, raise her, give her a cleaner life. Madison wasn't in a place to raise a child. And Lauren, she promised it would be a shared secret. A kindness. But apparently Lauren's kindness came with edits. She never mentioned me. She never told Madison we were married. She never said Grace had been introduced to our friends as someone else's child entirely. I always thought Grace was with a family, Madison said, her voice barely above a whisper. But now she knew the truth. That Grace had been folded into a lie just like I had. That Lauren's life was stitched together with threads of omission. I didn't know what to say. So I said the only honest thing I could. I'm sorry. We sat in silence for a while. Then Madison said something I'll never forget. I used to feel guilty for letting her go. But now? I think I saved her from something worse. Before we parted, I told her I'd be removing Grace and Lauren from my estate plans. That I was setting up a trust for Grace, contingent on official verification. Not out of guilt, but because it was the right thing to do. Madison nodded. We didn't hug. Didn't shake hands. We just nodded. Like two people who'd both survived the same fire from different sides of the house. When I got back to the motel that night, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I barely recognized the man looking back at me. But for the first time since this all began, he looked honest. Not perfect. Not happy, but honest. The first few weeks after meeting Madison felt like I was walking on the edge of a cliff, exhausted, hollow, but strangely alert. It was the kind of alertness that comes after surviving a crash. You're not really okay, but you're too shaken to fall asleep at the wheel again. The divorce proceedings moved forward quietly. Lauren hadn't contested anything, at least not yet. I think she was still reeling from the silence. I hadn't said a word to her since the day I walked out. No confrontations. No explanations. Just a legal envelope on her kitchen table and a vanished husband. If she was confused, she didn't show it. At least not directly. But she started sending letters. Handwritten. Each one in the same floral stationery she used back when we were still newlyweds. The same cursive. The same careful tone. But the words were hollow. They spoke of confusion. Of miscommunication. She tried to redefine her betrayal as a rough patch, like the past year had just been a blip we could iron out with counseling and maybe a couple's retreat. I didn't respond to a single one. She mailed 6 letters in total. I never opened any of them. I kept them in the drawer of the motel nightstand, each one a sealed reminder that silence could be louder than any reply. My lawyer said she hadn't challenged the asset division. She hadn't even retained counsel, just signed and returned the documents with a few minor adjustments, none of which were related to property. She didn't want the house. She didn't want the car. She didn't want anything that had once belonged to both of us. I think what she really wanted was her story back. Her version of it. The one where she was still in control. But control doesn't survive truth. And truth had found her. The kind stamped, signed, and notarized in court filings and DNA reports. Meanwhile, I kept in touch with Madison. At first, it was sporadic, an email here, a forwarded document there. But something about our conversations felt grounding. Not romantic, not even overly emotional. Just real. Her honesty was a kind of lifeline I hadn't realized I needed. We started exchanging letters, not unlike the ones Lauren had sent, but these weren't about pity or manipulation. They were about grace. About the small, human pieces neither of us had ever been given the full story on. I asked questions not because I wanted to pry, but because I wanted to understand the whole picture. Madison answered everything with quiet candor. She told me how scared she'd been when she gave Grace up. How broken she felt for years afterward. How much she hated herself for believing Lauren would do the right thing. And yet, she didn't speak with bitterness. Only caution. As if every word had to be examined before it was released into the world. I didn't expect to ever hear from her again, she wrote in one letter. But part of me hoped Grace would find me someday. Not because I think I deserve her, but because she deserves the truth. That line stuck with me. Because I knew exactly what she meant. I'd spent months drowning in lies, Lauren's, mine, everyone's. I'd clung to comfort over clarity for too long. And now that I had the truth, it felt both devastating and oddly freeing. I finally changed my will. I drove out to the county office, sat with my attorney, and rewrote everything. Lauren was removed from all accounts. Any residual assets we once shared were marked for liquidation. As for Grace, I didn't list her as a beneficiary either, but I created a trust in her name. It wasn't massive, but it would grow with interest. The terms were simple. When she turned 18, she'd have access to it. All she'd need to do was sign an acknowledgement of identity and meet with a third-party social worker to confirm she understood where the funds came from. No pressure. No contact required. Just truth. After that, something shifted in me. I didn't realize how much energy I'd spent holding up the ruins of my old life until I finally put them down. And once I did, there was space. Space for air, for silence, for new thoughts I hadn't let in before. I left the motel. It wasn't a dramatic exit. Just a checkout and a thank you to the woman at the desk who'd seen me walk in broken and let me stay without questions. I rented a small house outside Syracuse. Not far from where I grew up. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, a crooked fence, and a backyard full of weeds. But it was mine. Every creaky floorboard and leaky faucet felt like a declaration of independence. For the first time in years, I started making my own coffee in the morning. I stopped checking my phone every 2 minutes. I stopped wondering what version of myself I needed to be in someone else's eyes. And Madison? She visited. We didn't plan it, not formally. She said she was driving through the state to visit a cousin and asked if I'd mind a quick stop. I told her I'd leave the porch light on. We didn't talk about Grace that evening. Not really. We talked about books, music, bad diner food, and our mutual hatred for holiday gift exchanges. She stayed for 2 hours. Then 3. Eventually, I offered to heat up some leftovers. She said yes. By the time she left, the sun had long since set and the air smelled like burnt garlic bread. I didn't ask her to stay. And she didn't ask if she could. But as she got into her car, she looked at me with a tired kind of smile, like someone who'd been walking with a heavy coat for too long and finally felt a breeze. "Thanks for not being angry," she said. I admitted. "But not at you." She nodded, didn't say anything else. Just drove off. She came back the next weekend. And the one after that. We never called it anything. We didn't need to. Sometimes we planted herbs in the backyard. Sometimes we rewatched terrible movies from the early 2000s and debated whether or not they held up. They didn't. Sometimes we just sat on the porch drinking tea and letting the quiet say what words couldn't. She never called me Dad. I never asked for that. And Grace didn't know me. I didn't want to force myself into a story I wasn't written into. But I started to think that maybe not all families are forged in biology. Some are forged in truth. In choice. One night, after she'd gone home, I sat on the back steps of the house, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, listening to the sound of wind moving through dry branches. Lauren had stopped writing. Her last letter had arrived 2 weeks prior, unopened like the rest. I tossed it in the fireplace without ceremony. Grace had started posting on social media. Teen angst, mostly. I stumbled on her profile accidentally one night while scrolling. She didn't mention Madison. But she did mention betrayal. Her posts were sharp, bitter, confused. I didn't engage. She had a right to her feelings. But I hoped quietly, selfishly, that one day she'd understand we weren't the villains she thought we were. We were just the ones who stayed when the lies fell away. The house remained modest. My savings took a hit. But I planted bell peppers out back, bought used furniture that creaked and cracked with character, and hung a photo of my parents in the hallway, a reminder that real things last longer than illusions. Revenge never came. Closure didn't show up in a single, satisfying moment. It arrived in waves. In quiet mornings. In the sound of birds returning to the yard. And peace? Peace wasn't loud. It was patient.